Okay, I think we're live now. Not yet. We're live now. Okay. No? Yes? Okay. Okay, now we're live. Let's start this first webinar of 2017. The first of 4 webinars we're going to do this year. Today's topic is peace and stereotypes. We've had a few complications in the weeks prior to this webinar because some panelists had to cancel last minute. So now we're here with 6 panelists and Ali and me as moderators. Very short about World Peace Youth. World Peace Youth is a NGO that's part of the United Nations within the World Peace Prayer Society. It was created by our good friend Jules L'Amour, who is a peace activist from New York. Many years ago, Jules participated at the Youth Peace Conferences in Morocco. And unfortunately, when she got to the conference, she found out that all the panelists were old, gray-haired men. So there was not much youth participation. And that is what prompted Jules to create this online platform for youth from around the world to participate, interact, and exchange their ideas and opinions about any topic related to peace and tolerance, respect. We started this last year, so this is our 5th webinar. And along with Ali, I will be moderating today to make sure that you have a great debate wherever you are. What are the webinars really for? What do we aim to achieve? We try to connect people, young people from all over the world, from all backgrounds, whatever they're studying, whatever their opinions are, and whatever their race, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, whatever, to bridge amongst us and kind of bypass adult interference, because as Jules always says, adults tell us to learn from their experience, but we live in today's world and we all see that their experience hasn't brought us very far. So our goal is to think together and come up with better ideas than they did. Very quickly before we start the webinar, I want to announce the upcoming World Peace Forum to be held in Jordan from the 21st to 25th of September of this year. It will be the 11th World Peace Forum, and the main topic will be women's rights, refugees, and I think interreligious dialogue, and it will be held in a refugee camp in Jordan. And just so you know, for all the viewers at home, you can ask questions in the option and on the lower side of your screen, which can be answered either written by the panelists or live in the second half of our webinar. Okay, so let's start with the introductions of our panelists. How about we start with Kelt from Canada? In Canada, from Bermuda. Welcome, Kelt.
Thank you. So I'm Cal Conyers-Steed. I'm studying in the University of New Brunswick in St. John, New Brunswick. I am from Smiths, Bermuda. I am a poli-sci student minoring in business. And yeah, what other stuff should I introduce more? I'm 21 years old, and I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you very much. Lord, next up.
Hi guys.
Sorry if I mispronounced your name.
It's Lord. So it's fine. So my name is Lord Hammond. I'm currently studying in St. Thomas University in Canada. I'm from Ghana, Accra, Ghana. That's the capital. And I'm currently studying I'm doing a double major in international relations and economics, and then minor in business.
And how long have you been living in Canada?
I've been here since 2014, so roughly
Okay,
close to 3 years, I guess.
great.
Yes, and yeah, that's me.
Okay, very good. Next up, Gabrielle Napoli from New York.
Okay, so I'm Gabby. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I study international relations and Latin American studies with a minor in communications at the university in upstate New York called SUNY New Paltz. And I just recently got back from a year studying abroad in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Great. Mohammed, welcome.
Hello guys, how are you? Thanks for inviting me for your to your discussion, to your first panel in 2017. I am Hamad Sakar, I'm from Egypt. Currently, I am studying and live in Vienna in Austria. I study political science in my second year, and I'm studying also European studies in my second year. And I'm looking forward to our discussion, and thanks for the invitation again.
Omar, some of you might already know Omar. He's been participant on previous webinars, but for the other people, maybe you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Omar Abu Bakr. I'm an Egyptian. I work as a teaching assistant in the political science department of the British University in Egypt. I was very honored to be part of this project since the very beginning. I participated in our first webinar when we discussed the principles of the Fuji Declaration and how each one of the panelists actually practice the Fuji Declaration during their daily lives. I was also very pleased and honored to participate in the 10th World Peace Forum and the 2nd Youth World Peace Forum in Florianopolis, Brazil, last September. And yeah, I think that's all. Yeah.
Okay, great. And last one, I think, is Dylan.
Yes.
Welcome, Dylan.
Hello, nice to speak with all of you. I'm glad and humbled to be chosen to come, although it might have been somebody dropping out, but hey. So I can preface this by saying that I come from somewhat of a privileged background, so I acknowledge that before I say most of the things I'm about to say. So basically, my past, I was into politics at one point, but now I've really kind of dug into social economies and building social enterprises. So I was fortunate enough to go to the Global Social Economic Forum this year and participate in a forum with over 50 countries, I believe. And my involvement with Enactus, which is an international nonprofit focused on helping communities through social enterprise. So that's kind of my background. And I'm from New Brunswick.
Okay, great to have you, even if you're just sitting in for someone else.
Yeah. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then Ali, you want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ponte. I'm from Caracas, Venezuela. I'm currently studying in Fredericton, New Brunswick, in Canada, and double major in international relations and economics at St. Thomas University. And it is an honor for me to be sharing with you guys today in this incredible platform that I'm pretty sure will lead us to great things in the not too distant future. Thank you very much.
Okay, last but not least, myself. My name is Tomas. I'm 21 years old. I'm German and I live in Argentina, where I'm studying political sciences. I've been very active with the peace movement for as long as I can remember through my family. And I got in touch with Jules 2 years ago in Egypt, where we did our first webinar with Omar, I remember, if I remember right.
Yeah. Yes.
And well, now we're trying to make this webinar grow and connect as many people as possible and multiply the efforts so that young people all over the world can connect through this platform and exchange their ideas. Okay, as you all know, today's topic is peace and stereotypes. The world is burdened with many stereotypes of all sorts. Some are kind of funny, some are offensive, and I think stereotypes can often be a barrier before you actually get to know a culture. It happens with every country and with every culture. So what we're trying to do today is tell the viewers at home about our personal experiences as youth from around the world, and what experiences we have made with stereotypes ourselves, and what we can do to bring those stereotypes down, and hopefully together work towards a more peaceful world. Let's start with Dylan from Canada. He started saying very humbly that he's from a very privileged background, which I think is something very brave to say in today's world. So thank you for that sincerity, and just tell us anything you've experienced, any testimonies regarding stereotypes.
So obviously, there's not very many stereotypes in regards to my own, like you can see. But I say that jokingly, but in reality, like I'm part of the alliance, you know what I mean? If somebody, and it's up to everybody else, just because you're not a part of these stereotypical or part of these kind of races that would have stereotypes associated with them, doesn't mean that you can't help. You helping is standing up for those who can't or are being ostracized in some vein.
Let me ask you a question. There's one stereotype you would fit in, I think, which is the white male privilege stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you cope with that? How do you react to people who say that you're wherever you are only because you're more privileged than others?
I tell them that
because obviously you also put in some effort of your own. It's not like you're not doing anything.
No, I don't take that as an insult by any means. So what I would say to somebody like that, I don't use this privilege in a way as self-promotion. Obviously, it happens regardless, but I use it in regards to trying to help other people by by talking to people, different stakeholders and whatnot, what have you, in order to figure out solutions for specific problems. So making sure that everybody's at the table whenever those conversations are had. So it's not necessarily about me being white. It's about me using my privilege in order to help somebody else. So I would never, ever I don't want to grow up and have not made an impact. So I'm definitely going to be using that privilege, and I hate saying that word, but I'm going to use that in order to help everybody around me.
While we're at it, Dylan, Ruth Amundela says, I think if we are going to talk about stereotypes, we should first identify and talk about what privilege really is. So what do you think privilege really means in your case?
In my case, I think it has to do with society. I have a little bit of a sociology background, and the idea of like mainstream media, what do you see perpetuated often as beauty? It's somebody white, you know what I mean? Like these kind of stereotypes, they're stereotypes because you do not fit into these molds in which society has decided is pretty. And with a predominantly white media, that's one of the biggest reasons for privilege. It's the idea that these people are put on a pedestal, and I'm being one of them. And you know what I mean? It's the media's fault. Is what I'm trying to say. Short.
And Kelt, what would you answer to this? Because if you allow me to say, you're not one of those molds society.
Yeah.
So what's your reaction?
Yeah, I make the joke that I tick all the boxes. Being a person of color, being someone a part of the LGBT community, and being an international student in a province where really doesn't have a large international population. And when I look at stereotypes, it's simply based on it's just people just do not know and do not have the education. Do not have the education, don't have the knowledge around different cultures just because they're not they haven't been surrounded around it. So like, for me personally, my way of, dealing with stereotypes and, encouraging peace is just simply educating people. It's like, providing them, telling them my story. And I find in particular, really telling people the problems I have with stereotypes and, the problems I have had with discrimination goes a long way. And, really letting people know what they can do to help people.
Okay, makes a lot of sense.
Great.
Yeah.
So, Lord, based on what Kyle has mentioned so far, how can you describe your experience by being another international student living here in Canada?
So, being an international student in Canada, it's a nice thing, but coming in, like my first week, I was shocked by the kind of I don't want to use ignorance, but it's the perfect word here, right?
Lack of knowledge.
Thank you. Lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge. Thank you. So the typical ones I've heard that is it's crazy is that Africa is a country and all Black people look the same.
Right.
To me, it's something that has bothered me these years so far. And I try not to look at it from an African perspective. I try to see it from everyone else's, just to make sure that I don't offend anyone, The main thing about stereotypes that I think people need to understand is that you basically don't have to, you have to look at different perspectives. That's what I believe. Like, even if you don't have the knowledge, you need to be able to take one part and then try to merge these two parts and then think about it very well before you utter words, So.
And Lord, we were talking about privilege earlier.
Yeah.
On the other side of the privilege would be, do you feel privileged to have had the opportunity to leave Ghana and study in a place like Canada?
Absolutely.
And how do you use that? Are you planning on going back to your community in Ghana, or do you want to stay in Canada?
So yes, at the point, I'm definitely going to want to go back and then help my community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also somewhat from a privileged background.
Okay.
Not everyone has the opportunity to go outside Ghana and then go to places like Canada, the US, and other countries. Right. So I definitely count myself as very privileged. Yeah.
And another example of someone from Africa who's studying abroad is Mohammed Sakir. Mohammed, how do you feel about what Lord's been saying?
Hello guys. Hello guys. How are you? Thank you for the discussion about peace and stereotypes. For me, I had this problem in my country, my home country in Egypt, before I moved to Vienna, because like before I was studying pharmacy and just I decided to study political science, and like some people were like, well, no, you can't do this, you can't move from, like, you can't change your studies from pharmacy to political science because that's not a good one, you can't work after your studies. Right. But then I have moved to Vienna, where I started to study political science and to engage, to have activities and social impact on other people. And those people from Egypt who were criticizing me at the beginning because of my study, who started by the time to be some of my, some of my who support me, or some of who like always ask me how they can do this, and they asked me to engage also and do what I am doing now. So it's all about just the time, and the best way to discuss this topic with stereotype people is to give them really good example and positive example of yourself, because it depends on what you are doing and when. But by time when you can show them that you had the right and you were right, that your choice was good, they start to change their minds, not totally, but somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And Sark, you have talked about your experience in Africa, but now talking about your experience in Vienna, in Austria, because the understanding of Austria is very interesting. Like when we compare it to Canada, for example. In Canada, we see the United States as a big power, and Canada as the next superpower after the U.S. And in Germany, in Europe, it's quite similar, because Germany is like the big superpower in Europe. Austria is a very well-developed country, but how has been your experience with this and stereotypes? Like, do people tend to be more open in Austria with international people?
Well, in Vienna, as you know, in Vienna there is a headquarter of United Nations, and there are many other international organizations, and that's why Vienna is more open and more, like, say, global than most of other countries, because there are so many international people studying in Vienna. Like, the people from Vienna itself, they think that sometimes their politics is affected by German politics, but like, I think and I believe that that's not true, because Austria is an own country. They are doing their politics by themselves. And about the international communities in Vienna, there's like very few of them who are stereotyped against international people. At the beginning, for example, at the University of Vienna, when I told people that I'm from Egypt, they were like they are interested to know more about you, your background, and they start to ask you about the revolution or what's going on in Africa. And then when they see like you have good opinions about what's going on now, they start to ask you about other issues in Europe, not just in Africa. And as example, like as you said, Germany and Austria, I don't see that Germany is affecting or playing a role in the Austrian politics at all.
Right. Okay, interesting. I myself am German, so it's interesting that you say that, because I see that a new stereotype has emerged in Europe, where they are trying to compare the power of Germany today to what it once aimed at during the Nazi regime. So they're trying to say that Germany wants to be this great big power in Europe again and rule over the smaller nations like the Netherlands, like Austria. I think that's a very dangerous way of looking at it. Something we shouldn't fall for, I think. Next, I want to ask Gabrielle from New York. She represents so many different cultures and stereotypes. Women, American, everybody always talks about Jewish Americans and Palestinian American or Arab Americans and Italian background, and you're right in the middle. So how do you feel about all these stereotypes emerging that are trying to bring us all in conflict when really we should be working together?
Well, I think that the U.S., of course the phone's ringing. But anyway, I think that the U.S. has this really big desire to categorize everybody, all of the citizens. And so for me, growing up as somebody of Italian background, Egyptian background, and as well being Jewish, I've always found it difficult to really exactly
fit in somewhere.
I couldn't necessarily go into the community of like, all hardcore Italians. I couldn't necessarily fit in with all of the hardcore Egyptians, let's say, or the Middle Eastern community.
Right.
The, you know, very like the extreme Jewish community, I definitely didn't find that I had a place for. So I think that society with these stereotypes is really trying to isolate us, and it's trying to pull us farther away rather than pulling us together as a society. And especially I think that people, when they've learned about my specific backgrounds, they've always tried to tell me, well, since you're one thing, you're not another thing. So for example, they would say, well, you may be Italian and Egyptian, but because you're Jewish, that cancels everything out. So those cultures don't exist. But the thing is, those are two ethnic backgrounds, and this is religion. Religion is a separate subject. So people often try to place other people in boxes because they're uncomfortable or because they don't really understand.
Right. So
And
you
I think that
it comes from a certain fear of the people because they haven't really gotten to know the other culture. So
yeah,
it's a defense.
Yeah, I think that it's because we're, you know, I think that a lot of defense comes out of being uncomfortable. So especially what we see going on with the US right now and all of the different divides that we're trying to create against different cultures is out of ignorance and is out of fear of truly not understanding the cultures. And I think that it's a big problem that we have today.
So, Gabriel, that being said, how do you think people learn to make stereotypes, and how they might unlearn them at the same time?
Right. I mean, stereotypes, they do say that stereotypes in a sense are derived from some type of truth, but it's not necessarily the whole truth. So these stereotypes, let's say stereotypes about Muslims, this derives from the 1% of Muslim terrorists that we have.
Right.
And so it's like there's a saying that we have in the US, it's like one good apple spoils them all. So the idea is that, so, you know, a small select group of people did a bad thing and they all happen to come from this one particular culture or this one particular religion. So therefore they're all bad now.
So that being answered, like, what will you propose so people can start unlearning stereotypes?
I think it's all about education, and I think it's also, I mean, this is why I think this forum is very great, because it really does start from education in the youth. I think that schools because we're having such issues with race, I mean, issues with race and religion are issues that we're seeing all over the world. I mean, we just saw with the terrorist attacks in London the other day, but it really is integral to educate the youth at a young age about cultural acceptance. I think that idea of like a class about cultural acceptance should be something that's considered just as important as learning about the conquest of your country.
Exactly.
I kind of want to connect to what Lord said earlier. He said the biggest misconception and very simplistic misconception everybody had was Africa being a country and all the Africans look the same. But that kind of applies to every region of the world, because they always say all South Americans are Mexicans. Like they always call everybody Mexicans, or all Asians look the same, or all Germans are tall and blonde hair, blue eyes. So these stereotypes are always.
You defy them all.
Yeah.
I know. And the question is, no, not the question. What I'm trying to say is that the only way, besides education, or maybe as a means of education, is for me to actually go to the place you're stereotyping and let yourself be shown that it's not like that. So, because before coming to Argentina, even though I'm half Argentinian, I thought everybody looked a certain way also. And it's like Lord said, it's ignorance, because you didn't know any other way. And then I come here to Argentina and you have all kinds of people walking around, you know. And I don't know, same with other countries.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Gabby said about the education, like I am a big component on, you know, education, and it's very interesting to see how younger generations could really change, you know, older generations' perspectives. So, you know, growing up as a kid, I was always taught, you know, be tolerant. You have to be tolerant of people that are different. And now that I look at it now, tolerance for me is just like, okay, yeah, I know you're different. and I know that, you know, you're different from me, but like, I'm just going to tolerate you. And I'm not going to take the time to get to know you. So we're not building that connection to build that respect. What we really need to start doing is, you know, having those classes, you know, and building people, allowing people to build, you know, respect for one another and have that understanding. You know, like, I'm not going to, if I understand, you know, the Muslims, for example here, the Muslim community, you know, I know that, you know, not everyone is a terrorist, because I made the initiative to, you know, respect their culture and respect the religious aspect of it. So that's what we really need to try to encourage, you know, people to do now, is like, you know, remove away from, you know, creating that tolerance and actually get the respect in there, and, you know, get the education and really break down the walls.
Yeah, and I think that it only takes really one person to get this message through to one person, or like Tomas said, like literally meeting the people. It just takes one person to defy a stereotype, to change your mind, which can therefore change a whole community's mind.
I have a question for Mohammed, if you may. Because of this whole Arab and Muslim and terrorist stereotype, what do you think is the influence of the media, especially of social networks? Because as we all know, on the upside, we're all youth and we all can connect from one point to the other and instantaneously. But on the other hand, with our generation, we also we're brought up with the interconnectivity and the immediate spreading of mass media, which can also be, like in America right now, the alternative facts can very well be wrong information, wrong or hurtful stereotypes. I was watching a BBC video clip the other day stating that the attack in London you can choose to label it as a terrorist attack, or you can choose to label it as a regular criminal act. So Mohammed, how do you see the influence of the media on this?
Well, sure. Media has a very big influence on us, on other people also, because they are in every part of our life, especially social media, because that's now like everyone has access to social media. But we, as educated guys, as educated leaders, we should have the ability to differentiate between what's true and what is not true. We should be also thinking critical, and critical thinking means that we should like take a look into the topic, and we have to see what's relevant, what's true, or what's not. And our goal should be to develop and invent, and not to just copy from each other what is like be handed on social media or in media at all. Because the problem is, once you see a post on media or some articles, we start by nature as humans just to copy them and like to share them. But we should, as educated people, really to get these posts and this news in a critical opinions and critical aspects, to have by the end productive actions, because taking actions against this kind of media is a very crucial step.
Right.
And Omar, since you're also from Egypt, what do you think will be the best way to fight the media?
The media?
Stereotyping.
Oh, okay. So I just want to share that with all those who are attending with us the webinar today, some sort of my experience in the workshop that I've conducted in the Peace Forum in Brazil. My Peace Forum, in my workshop in the Peace Forum in Brazil was actually discussing a similar topic, and I started the workshop, the conduction of the workshop by asking the participants, who were almost most of them, they were of our age, and what do you know about the Middle East? I just give them colored cards in order to give them the chance to write whatever they want to write about what is the very first thing they imagine in their minds when they hear the word Middle East. And to my surprise, that many of, despite of the technological advancement and despite of the globalization, the era of the globalization we're living in, and the social media and all this stuff, I was surprised that many of the answers I got was very, very stereotyping. Like many of the people, this is just a very simple example. Like many of those who submitted their cards to me, they wrote that they think that all women in the Middle East are wearing burqas or face veil, and actually, to my surprise, yeah, the percentage of the people who are wearing face veils in countries like Egypt, Tunisia, and North Africa, and in the Levant also, it's not that big. So we could actually assume that the entire Middle Eastern women are wearing face veil. So I could actually understand what you are saying about that, the advancement of technology and that of the widespread of social media could actually bridge the people together. However, it doesn't seem like it's so effective. Where in 2017, actually people still thinking that the stereotyping the behavior and the lifestyle of the people living in this part of the world. So I think
It's not easy.
It's not so easy, but as our friend Gabriel had just mentioned, I think it's the one person who can actually change by his or her interaction with others, and people getting to know each other, and they have the ability to sit in front of each other and to talk like what we're doing now. This is what would actually change, and that would actually make a difference. It was this moment in the forum when we were all gathering at the end of the day in one of the restaurants, eating and having fun, and we're all sitting all together, and every one of us were open. All of us were open to discussions and to ask questions about each one of us, faith, cultural background, and every one of us was providing. Each one of us was providing the other with the answer that would let him really understand the difference between him and the other. I don't want to speak too much on that regard, but I want also to highlight something that is really, really important to me. It's very difficult that the people think of different faiths, extremists of different faiths. They could think that God doesn't have a wisdom of creating us different. God created us different because he wants us to be different. This is the one thing that we all should understand. We were all created different because we should stay like that, and we should accept our diversity because it's our point of strength, not our point of weakness.
Okay.
I think that would be the first step of breaking down the stereotypes.
Embrace the diversity.
Yes.
Okay, Dylan, you wanted to say something?
Yes. So I had a very good chat with one of our professors a few weeks ago, and it kind of stuck with me. And that the idea of stereotypes to be broken down in its simplest form is ignorance and generalization. So what had been brought up with that professor specifically is the idea of exposure. So if we can expose these people to the people they might have some prejudices or stereotypes towards, I think it's a good way, because at first sight they might be like, oh, well, I dislike this certain demographic because of this, but then you introduce it from somebody from that demographic specifically, and then, oh, well, I like everyone except for those people. And then with more exposure comes more tolerance. Not even tolerance, more, let's say, embracing of other people's cultures. And that's kind of my perspective in that regard, is to expose people to as many different, because it's Anyway, feel free to take it away. That's kind of the point I wanted to bring up.
Well, we have been talking about Muslims mostly, but and this question is for all of you guys. Do you think certain groups are more subject to stereotyping than others? If so, why do you think this happens?
Any takers?
Oh,
I mean,
rock, paper, scissors for it. You could go get it.
Well,
ladies first.
Thank you. Oh, what a stereotype. You could honestly break it down as to, I think that the groups that are a lot of times in society that are subject to the most stereotypes are the groups that have been persecuted the most in society. And these, all of Latin America has been, totally destroyed by the US in its conquest for Latin America. There are so many stereotypes that exist on, as Tomas was saying, about what is the stereotypical Latin American. Women historically have been extremely persecuted among society, and every single right that a woman has today in society is because another woman fought for that right. But still, these stereotypes about what a woman should be, what a woman should look like, what a woman should act like, talk like, XYZ, still exists in this day. A woman today in an office, let's say she's a force to be reckoned with, you know, as they say, the saying, like, this woman seems to be a very strong person in the office. She does a lot. She really is, you know, a strong figure. Everybody immediately notices that this woman is a strong figure because they expect that she shouldn't be. It's always noted that this woman is very powerful because everybody assumes that the woman is not going to fulfill this role, that that's a man's role. So people aren't necessarily going to be very forthcoming about when a man is very go-getter about everything. So I think that often in society we do really see the most stereotypes placed on these people who have suffered the most.
So suffered the most throughout time, or most people who've suffered?
That's a good question. I would open that up to everybody else.
Because I think
your question there.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Gabby said that the people who are most vulnerable to stereotypes are the ones who have most suffered. And then my counter question is, the people who have most suffered in terms of quantity of how many people suffered, or in terms of how long they've been suffering throughout time?
Well, I can argue that the individuals who are suffering now have been suffering for generations, per se.
That probably makes sense.
So it's like, you know, you still have the same groups of people still having these negative stereotypes and having this discrimination against them. So.
And what were you going to say earlier? Before Gabby?
Oh no, like she summed it up real good. We're on the same wavelength.
Okay, so I was going to say that the people who are most, I don't really quite remember the question Ali asked, but I was going to say the people who suffer most are the ones who have the least power to express their concerns. The ones that have the smallest way to voice their concerns, and the most vulnerable group, which in other words means the smallest group. So in terms of quantity, I think, because those are the ones we don't hear about, and those are the ones not portrayed in the media. There's probably tons of stereotypes that we don't know because they're so small and they only concern such a small group, that we go through life without ever knowing that they feel neglected, you know?
For example, what will you guys say when it comes to talk about the LGBT community? Are there any stereotypes when it comes to talk about the LGBT community in your respective regions?
You just went out there.
Yeah, we didn't hear the question, the essential part.
Yeah.
Repeat the question, Ali.
Hello?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Because we have been talking about stereotypes, right? And small groups of people that are essentially like a stereotype against, right? But based on this, like, what would you guys say when it comes to talk about the LGBT community and stereotypes against the LGBT community? Are there any stereotypes in your respective regions when it comes to accept and tolerate people with, you know, different preferences?
Okay. Well, I could speak from a New Brunswick perspective.
Right.
From how because New Brunswick has a strong religious background, so the LGBT community sometimes is, you know, they get their stereotypes and they get their discrimination from that lens. But also, I also now in recent years, I'm starting to realize that, you know, as you know, as a gay male, someone. So if you have like a gay male here and a straight male here, you know, the individual who's straight has this mentality as like, you know, I've been straight all my life, so I can't, you know, I can't relate to how, you know, my counterpart is gay. So like, you know, you have that disconnect there. You have that, you know, it's like, I just don't understand how this can happen when you have the gay individual who's like, you know, I'm been gay all my life. Like, this is who I am. Like, I've always been gay. And I can't understand, you know, how you could be straight. And it's just like, it goes back to what I keep on saying is, the underlining issue is, you know, we have the tolerance, you know, here at, you know, with all the wonderful things, you know, Canada does have some good things surrounding LGBT individuals, but that's just like, you know, the surface. Like, it's just the tolerance part of it, you know.
And it's Canada. It's one of the most modern countries.
Yeah, but like, you know, that's just like basically painting the outside of your house while the inside still needs repairs. You know, we need to get down to the real issues. We really need to understand, you know, in order to move forward and in order to, you know, break down those stereotypes, people have to be willing to have that conversation. And me personally, you know, being on St. John Pride's board and, you know, doing some LGBT things now in my own campus, it's just, I don't feel that people are ready to have that conversation.
I have a question to Thomas. May I ask it?
Yes.
Yeah, because Thomas, you've said, I know that you are half German, half Argentinian, so you are actually you are half European, half Latin America.
A walking stereotype.
Yeah. Can you share your experience with this? Because I've never heard about that from you.
Okay, this is off topic. Well, I'm kind of like Gabby, what she said earlier, because when I was living in Germany, I was always the Argentinian or the South American, and now I'm living here in Argentina, and I'm always the German, you know. Yeah. I don't really get to feel at home 100% anywhere. But I'm very happy with that, because like you said, we have to embrace our diversity. And if I was just one Argentinian more, maybe I wouldn't feel as special as I do about myself right now, you know. So about stereotypes and about myself, I grew up in Germany in a very German family, and I went to school in France. And then my first exposure to stereotyping was when I first started middle school in France. And worst of all, it was a boarding school. So I was at the school the whole week, and I didn't know any word of French. And interestingly, well, I was treated like a German, like a Nazi and a crowd and whatever, by my French co-students, which was, I didn't understand it, because nobody in the German schools ever called the French people anything, you know. So that was kind of weird. But what stuck out the most is that this is kind of controversial, but the white French people treated me better than the French people that were descendants of immigrants. So the second generation French people were a lot more aggressive and xenophobic towards Germans than actual Germans, you know, which doesn't make any sense really, but I never understood that, and I got through it, and whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, like we always say, and it made me a lot stronger. And I'm very thankful for the experience. But at the time it was really hard. And now I live here in Argentina as a German. And again, in this specific case, Argentinians are very proud about their nationalism, and especially about football. And when Germany beat them in the final, it was a burden to live here, because everyone was saying, okay, you're half Argentinian, but you rooted for Germany in the World Cup final. You're a traitor, you know. And I say this jokingly, but they were really aggressive in it. It's just something, if you come from somewhere else and you've seen the world from a different perspective, it doesn't fit in your cosmovision, I want to say. So I hold on to my earlier argument that the best way to fight or to correct stereotypes is to actually get out of your comfort zone, travel a little bit. You don't have to go too far to learn about different cultures. Yeah, that's my experience.
Now, I have a question for Mohammed and Omar specifically. When coming back to the LGBT community topic, what's like the grade of tolerance in, well, both in Europe, in the case of Mohammed in Austria, but in Egypt and in the rest of the Middle East, what's the level of tolerance when it comes to talk about the LGBT community? Is there any at all?
Tough question.
Okay.
Well,
Okay. I'll leave Mohammed to answer.
Okay,
Yalla.
okay. Well, about this community in Egypt, it's really hard to talk about because Egypt is a little bit religious country, and Islam religion is very, very spread and involved in the community, and people feel almost offended if someone just starts to talk about such topics, because also like in the last few years people started about talking about atheists or people who aren't religious, and it was really very hard topic because people aren't ready yet to face
Right.
different opinions, and they aren't yet really
Having trouble hearing you, Mohammed. Hello? Hello, hello, hello.
to feel.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, try again, yeah.
Okay, from the beginning.
No, just the last 10
about-
seconds we didn't hear.
Okay, and even in the last few years, like we started to talk about such topics like atheisms and people who aren't religious at all, but that wasn't so easy because people felt offended when we start just to talk about this topic. And I believe that in the few next years, people will change their opinions a little bit about it when we can like ensure them that those people are really not so harmful,
Right.
and they are really normal people, are trying just like to feel themselves and to be free, because we shouldn't just mention the freedom of speech, but we should also mention the freedom of thinking, because if we can't think and if we can't express ourselves, we will not be able at all to speak.
Right. Right.
And
That's a good point.
It's
What's-
all about engagement, and we as a panelist and as young people, we should engage more such topics, really to improve and make campaigns and like to provide people with information about communities like LGBT or atheism people or like whatever. Just people have like some lack of information, and I believe that it's again and again and again, it's all about education. If you can guarantee a good education for those people, you will get more tolerance from them against according to any topic or for any community.
And can I just hang on a question, and then Omar, you can answer both. How do you feel about the stereotype the Western world has about Islam regarding women?
Okay, so there is a I apologize for getting it. There is some sort of noise. I don't know. Okay, so I apologize for getting it from a bit of an academic perspective. But there is a very famous theory called Orientalism. It was introduced first by Edward Said, who was a Palestinian American scholar, and he was discussing the fact that there are some certain values and some certain scholarly writing and discussion that took place during the colonial period has portrayed the Middle East in a certain way. There is the very famous example of a man, a professor in a university, who is entering a place of parties, and he's looking at the people, and they find them dancing, sitting in the ground, rocking and roll, and enjoying their times. But the whole entire situation for that professor is alien to him. Okay, he doesn't find himself, he couldn't define himself within the context that surrounds him. So when he is required to write a report about this party, because he got used to the classic parties with violence playing and the people sitting listening to the music, he would definitely write a report saying that these people are barbaric, they are not, and they don't understand what party is, what parties are, and stuff like that. Relating that to your question, it doesn't really make sense for me of setting the of narrowing down the values of the Western values of how women should behave to expect all women in different parts of the world to behave in the same way.
Right.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I believe that women have the right to choose their own lifestyles, and that right it has been granted for them by norms, by faith, by religion. And it was that moment in the forum when people kept asking me about, do women in your country have the right to wear colored veils? I told them, women in my country have the right to not to wear the veil. They have the right to run for presidency. The fact that these are some sets of facts that many people in the Western societies, they don't really understand about the nature of women in societies like the society that I'm living in. Women are highly engaging. They are engaging in the civil society. They are running into official posts, and they're members of the parliament. They are highly represented, and the people, they are trapped in certain understanding of women as portrayed in the media and as portrayed in the movies and as portrayed by the terrorist groups as if they are oppressed and they don't have the right to engage in anything.
Vlad, do you have anything to say in regards to what Omar have mentioned so far?
Is it kind of similar in Ghana? I've never been to Southern Saharan Africa, so I have no idea what everyday life is like there.
Yes, I believe it's very similar, because Ghana is also like a very strong religious country, and being able to accept that something that is from the West is really hard. It's really hard, and it's really hard on the people, you know. It also boils down to the idea of tolerance, and I know with tolerance it's gonna change for the better. So I'm guessing for our generation, stuff is definitely gonna change.
And what's the dominant religion in Ghana?
It's Christianity.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's by far not as progressive as in Canada or America, you would say.
No, it's more charismatic. It's more like people coming up with their own kind of
okay, yeah,
Christian,
their own church.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I wanted to ask Gabrielle something else. Since we're talking about religion, and you're Jewish, but as far as I understand, maybe you can tell everybody that you're ethnically Jewish, but not an everyday Jewish, practicant or whatever you would call it.
Right.
So how do you live your Jewish life?
How do I live my Jewish life? What a great question. Well, I can say that being Jewish is just very much intertwined with my Middle Eastern culture, especially. So I think that anything related to any type of Middle Eastern culture has some type of relation to Jewish culture as well, because my family they were Jews in Egypt and they fled from Egypt to the US. I used to be more religious when I was younger, I would say. I guess I felt more of a connection spiritually to it. And I think I lost it a bit getting older. And I think when I really found that I actually started to gain more of a sense of feeling religious was when I was living in Egypt, when I was living in Israel for 3 months. And I learned that while I was there, I didn't necessarily have to practice the religion actively, like a complete and utter servant to God, I guess you could say, to still consider myself Jewish. And I think that it being in Israel, I realized that I can still just be my normal self and not have to practice something every day and feel like I'm any less of a Jew, which I think I felt like before.
But what does it mean to you to be Jewish then? You know,
I think just to have just to feel personally a connection to Judaism. I don't think that being Jewish has to be defined by a literal act. I mean, there are a lot of Jews, the ultra-Orthodox Jews no, let me back up. In Jewish religion, it's stated that you are Jewish through the mother. So many people believe that if your mother was not Jewish, you are not Jewish. So let's say you come from a family with a Jewish father and you grew up practicing the religion. To many people, you would not be considered Jewish. And I think I don't really think that that's fair, because I think that in the sense, if somebody has a desire, that somebody feels a connection to this religion, I feel like they should be able to practice it and feel just as much of a right to call themselves a Jew just as anyone else.
Mm-hmm. And you said you had a question earlier?
I did have a question, yes. I wanted to ask to all of the participants how you guys have felt about Western influences being pushed into your society, and if you guys all feel a lot of pressure to perform or compete to the standard brought by the West.
Who wants to go first? Kelt? I guess you're from the West.
Yeah, and I had like some technical difficulties, so I didn't even get to hear the full thing.
So how do you feel? Oh, Gabby, you want to repeat a question?
Sure. I wanted to ask all of the panelists how they feel about Western influence being pushed into their countries, and if they feel that there's a lot of pressure to compete or perform to a specific standard of what is the Western standard of living.
Yeah.
Well, if I have the opportunity, I can answer.
Dude, go ahead.
I don't know, like my perception, apart from being from Latin America, in this case from Venezuela, I don't know, for some reason, with the notion that every Latin American country, and even from Canada as well, they have to look to the US for some reason, maybe because it's the most powerful country on earth. But
debatable.
In quotation marks.
Yeah, very debatable.
Yeah.
Stereotype.
But when doing so, like we lost the interest in getting to know more about the countries around us, the countries that are beside us. And sometimes what I feel is that we know more about what's happening in the US than what we know, for example, what's happening in Argentina. This is from a Latin American perspective.
Yeah, but you're right.
But yeah, we're constantly comparing ourselves with the US, and I think we should be authentic. I think that's what I would say the most important thing.
Well, this is like a topic that hits home for me, being that my country is still a colony.
Right.
Yeah, like, you know.
I'm sorry.
So, and, you know, I find that we are, just to piggyback on what was said, is because we're always are subjected to the influences from, you know, our mother country, and which is Britain, and the United States and Canada, and it dilutes the Bermudian experience, in quotations, because like everything is being diluted because we're being influenced, because this is the right way to go, like, you know, development, you know, international business, this is what you guys need, you know, it looks good, everyone's doing it, it's good for everyone. So it's really this topic really hits a nerve back home with people, because you know, you have half of the country who really wants to, you know, break away from it all, and then you have half of the country that's like, oh, I like it. So yeah, this is something that's really interesting.
Anybody else wants to answer Gabby's question? Maybe Omar, Mohammed, or Laud from an African perspective.
Okay, I was just thinking about it. I think it's a human fault if anyone just think that he or she or any country in the world has the monopoly over truth. and that the anyone could actually think that they have the absolute truth and understand everything, and they understand what is civilization, and they understand what is a certain utopian society should be formulated or be shaped. I think here is the point where even on an individual level, people, they actually tend to contend with each other because of that thing, because of that each one of us could actually fell into the mistake of thinking that he or she has the absolute truth. Relating that to the question of Gabriela, if I'm pronouncing your name right, just apologize if I don't really able to pronounce it right. I think that yes, it's sometimes the Western understanding of how society should be shaped might be very, very stressful to other Southern, if we're classifying the word into Northern and Southern, to other Southern states. And it is, I want to highlight the importance of that all society should actually understand that not all society should be formulated in the same way. I mean, like each one could have their authentic, like Ali was saying, that every country or every society is authentic in a certain way, and this should be highly appreciated.
Ali, you want to introduce our new friend? Ali, your microphone is off. Wait.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
Yes, we have a new friend from Italy. His name is Antonio Di Venere. He participated in the World Peace Forum in Brazil. It's an amazing human being, an amazing leader. So we have some questions for him. We have been talking about stereotypes. And well, not on this question won't be only for him. This is for all of you. Will you guys agree that when it comes to talk about stereotypes, there are like even low levels and high levels of stereotypes? Because when it comes to talk about Italian people, for example, I don't know why, but for some reason, the first thing that comes to our minds is pizza, pasta, and so. How would you?
And the mafia is very
Italian. So how?
And the way they speak, the way they move their hands with it.
Argentinian too, though.
So how would you guys?
And now on social media, you have those pictures circulating.
All of it like this. How to speak Italian?
So how do you guys respond to these stereotypes? So, Antonio.
Yeah, how? Antonio.
Wait, can you repeat it?
How do you respond to the typical Italian stereotype? Is it offensive to you? Do you joke about it? Or?
I think as far you can indicate us with this, we will be always famous to worldwide. So it's okay for us. If you talk about us, we will be okay.
Okay, that sums it up. Okay, everybody, it's already time for the questions, and we have some pending questions from the audience here. So I'm just going to start with the first one from Ruth Amunjela, and she asks, how do you guys think we can use all these experiences to improve our communities? Who goes first? Or who wants to answer this question? Because if we all answer every question...
I think I can.
Sorry? Lord.
Okay, I can answer. Me, Mohammed, can answer this first question.
Sure.
Please go ahead.
Well, first, thank you, Rose, for your question and about our experience and communities. I see the solution
Hello. Okay.
the engagement we should inspiration starts throughout the daily. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Well, about the first question, and like the point of communities, our experience, it's all about engagement and taking actions. Because as inspiration starts throughout the daily engagement, we should work together to generate grants that our friends and the other fellow young people are having the same opportunities together, like us today in the panel, and to enforce the sense of leadership and the social responsibility towards their social communities. So it's all about engagement. And we should also create partnerships and to have like a united world connected to each other to influence each other by ideas or initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Next question.
Welcome.
From Laiba Bazid. Millions of people are dying in Syria and Palestine. How can we stop those wars? It's a tough question.
That's a tough one.
Wow.
Who's courageous enough for this one? Kelt, what do you think?
I'll let one of my other panelists, answer this one.
Well, maybe we can skip this one because we're not experts on this topic.
Well, we'll say about our we have to understand ourselves. It's about engagement. It's about education. It's about traveling. It's about getting to know the world, getting to know different cultures, getting to know people, being open-minded. That's a way that, I don't know, in my opinion, that's in my humble opinion, I will say that will be the only way for us to stop conflicts around the world, by understanding each other. What do you guys think?
I support you, Ali. I think that it's the basic thing of understanding again and again. It's basic thing of understanding that we were all born different because we should be different, and that we should embrace our diversity. I'm quoting Tomas. So we shouldn't only focus on the things we have, the different things we have with each other. We should always think of the things we share in common. If we look into our beliefs, if we look into our pieces of thought, we might find a lot of things in common. So I think that people should always look and focus on the things they share in common as much as they actually now think of the differences between them.
Great.
Okay. There's another question from a former panelist, Renata Ling, who's also from Canada, but she was born in Hong Kong, if I remember right. And she asks to everyone, instead of asking how to break down stereotypes, how can we build peace and respect in the everyday experiences? What can help us connect to one another every day? So instead of thinking about the long run and about philosophical answers, how can we improve our lives and improve or build towards peace in our everyday life?
So I'll start.
Go
for
ahead.
me, I do this every day. I tell my story, and it's good to be because I classify myself as a leader, and so to be a good leader, sometimes you got to start the conversation and start the initiative. So like I feel that we always get caught up in we have to fix the big picture. Like the big picture is messed up. When if a bunch of little people just start to have those conversations, tell their stories, and try to encourage their friends and try to encourage their families to be accepting and be respectful, you can see the chain reaction. You can see the ripple effect of a changing mindset that you have in the community. And for a right now fix, having those conversations, telling your stories is a good way to is a good way to start fixing things.
Mm-hmm.
That's my thought process on it.
Anybody else? Dylan, how do you deal as a future leader
It's in my degree, actually. Like I said a while ago, I kind of want to hammer it home is the idea of exposure. So I mostly try to diversify my own friend groups and emphasize it with other people within Canada, coming from rural areas, to basically meet somebody new, meet somebody that you would not necessarily talk to in your everyday life, just to kind of widen your own lens, because it's invaluable. Once you start expanding your own horizons, it becomes accelerated. So that idea of meeting more people in order to kind of foster a more inclusive network. Very political answer, but yes.
but I like the part about meeting diverse people, because that gives you the most diverse panorama of opinions and of perspectives you can ever get. So
Thank you.
To add to what Dylan said, I like to regard people who hurt your feelings as teachers. You know, you get to pick up points from everyone you experience. So through that, I'm pretty sure it's really gonna help for the peaceful coexistence in the world. Yeah.
Loud, stay on for the next question. Sophia Toro.
I like that one.
While we're here, Sophia Toro asks, do you think that the advertisements affect or can interrupt an education about the stereotypes? So do you think the advertisements in general can affect or interrupt education on stereotypes?
Absolutely.
And how so?
Well, I came across an ad some time ago in China. It had a Chinese girl painted black, right? And almost everyone was angry about, like, every African I knew was angry about it. But what I'd like to say is, try to put your shoes in. Try to put yourself in those people's shoes. It comes to it bottoms down to the lack of knowledge, you know? So I'm guessing with advertisement, we need to open our minds, you know? You don't just see ads and then get education from ads. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. But how do you counter this, in this case, in the African advertisement?
For African, this is a tough one. African advertisement.
I mean, in your case, in the one you just stated, how do you go on about doing so that it doesn't affect it, you know?
Well, we've just spoken about this time and time. It bottoms down to at least knowing one person from the region, just friendships, you know? Like Dylan said, knowing diverse groups helps to counter all these stereotypes, and you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And before you leave, there's a question that mentions Ghana, so I'm just going to read it to you. It's anonymous. It says, it seems there's a lot of prejudice, judgment around LGBT in Egypt and Ghana and other African countries. How do you feel about these crimes against LGBT community? Is there a positive movement forward?
So, like I said, Ghana is huge on religion. So I'm thinking the best way to accept this kind of to accept the LGBT community in Ghana is going to be a change of mind for all Ghanaians, and tolerance. That's the primary thing we all have to look at before moving on to maybe finding groups, because I don't think there are any groups that actually look at LGBT
Right.
concerns in the country. So I'm pretty sure with our generation that's going to change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Mohammed or Omar, how do you feel about Egypt? I mean, Omar, you have already kind of answered this. Is there anything else you want to add, maybe, or have you said what there is to say? No.
No.
No?
There is another question from
Okay.
Alexandra Bustovic, the pronunciation. She asked, "How do we educate on stereotyping in general successfully instead of covering just stereotypes on one group in particular? How do we educate people about stereotypes? How do we break stereotypes? Not only for people coming from the Middle East, from Latin American people, but also we have to include the LGBT community, women, when it comes to talk about stereotypes."
I believe that you have to, and I think that a lot of this requires, even though it's not the easiest, face-to-face interaction. I think that one who has a stereotype about what a woman is like, or what a Muslim is like, or what a Latino is like, I think it's important for them to literally be confronted with this person who completely and utterly defies the stereotype in every means. And I think that really helps people break down a lot of mental barriers that they have to understand that things are not actually as black and white as they truly feel they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would take two approaches to this. This is something that's very dear to my heart, is, empowering younger generations, especially individuals under the age of 18, because in hindsight, they are our future, as, cliche as that is. But, providing them with an arsenal of acceptance and respect is what you really need to do. And as well as, getting policymakers on board to recognize that, right now, everyone sees how their parliamentarians act and the mindset that they have. We need to have a shock to the system when it comes to our elected officials, where people, move away from, what we have now and start to really, think about our future and really think about the underlying issues in our society. Because, everything goes back to, like, if you're not culturally sound and your community is not, at a balance with itself, you're not going to be academically successful. So you have to ensure that everyone is on sound mind, and you need to ensure that your community base has the proper mechanisms in place.
Mm-hmm. Just want to answer Fatima's comment in the comment section. She says we need to include more women in the next panels, and she's absolutely right. Our plan was to have equal numbers of men and women here, but my co-moderator, Dina, couldn't participate because she's at a place with a weak connection, and another speaker didn't fit the age requirements, and because the age has to be from 16 to 24 to be able to fit into the United Nations definition of youth activists. So because of organizational problems, we're not equally represented here. But at least we have Gabrielle, who's a very strong woman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle.
You're welcome.
Another question. We only have 15 more minutes before we have to close. Omir Bek Sultan asks, what do you think about what has more bigger influence on stereotypes? The point of view of certain people, or the mainstream opinion?
I'd like to talk to that a little bit. So having a consumer background, as well as a little bit of a marketing background, that's one of the biggest things, is this idea of tokenism within media. So they try to meet their quotas by adding somebody from a different culture within shows, let's say, or commercials, but they do it in a way in which they perpetuate their stereotypes in order to appease the general mass. So I think a good step would be creating more diverse programming on television and different things, what have you, commercial as well, and making them less about tokenization and more about opening up a culture and dialogue.
What's tokenization? I've never heard of this.
Tokenization is basically the idea of using a minority, so like including minorities within a program in order to have them represented, but only doing the bare minimum. So in this case, it'd be representing them in a stereotypical way.
Right.
So we can open up media and create more of a diverse media. Maybe perhaps have Bollywood TV within Canada and different things like that. You know what I mean? In order to open up the dialogue for people.
That's interesting.
Another question from Fatima here. Fatima Zara El Hafa. How can you deal with those stereotypes if you are the ones subjected to them without being or sounding aggressive? So how do you answer a stereotype without sounding too aggressive or too like defensive? Go ahead.
As something my mom used to always tell me as a young kid, you know, kill them with kindness. You know, if you're receiving negativity and you give negativity back, you're just fueling the fire.
Right.
You know, and it's a hard thing to do, but in the long run, if you are being subjected to any form of discrimination or, you know, negative stereotypes, you know, hold your head high, you know, take the higher road. And as hard as it is, you know, it's something that I have to remind myself, you know, on a daily basis. You know, it speaks volumes because, like, you know, at the end of the day, they're gonna look at you and be like, hold on, I keep on doing all these negative things to you, and you know, they're really not being bothered by it. So like, well, what's the deal about it? So you really need to, you know, think of the bigger picture when, you know, approaching like this. And that's just like a standpoint I take.
Mm-hmm. Ali?
To add to what to add to what you just said, I like to think that we all stereotype, you know? No one is immune to stereotypes. It is by realizing this, I like to believe that it's going to be like an impetus for all of us to change, you know? Just by realizing that we're all stereotypical, it's definitely going to help. So.
And you said we're all subject to stereotype, but we're also all
not immune.
Not immune.
Yeah.
But I mean in both ways, because we're often the cause of a stereotype, but we also we need to admit that everybody stereotypes at some point.
Exactly, but it doesn't make us bad people, does it?
Exactly. No, it doesn't necessarily. But yeah, it's a funny thing you notice. I guess we all stereotype without ever noticing, maybe.
Yes.
So, Ali, do you have another question from the audience? Ready for us?
Not really. I don't know. But yeah, I have to be honest with you guys.
I can further talk to the point that was just brought up.
Sure, please.
Because I see it as like this kind of idea of you're always trying to meet this point, but there's always going to be something. As long as there's diversity in the world, there's always going to be some type of stereotyping. So it's not a question of whether it's going to be ever assimilated or it's going to be deleted from society. I think it's just trying to keep the balance and making sure that the negative stereotypes don't go too far.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I have a question. It's not specifically from the group, but this is a question like for all of us to think about stereotypes, to think about peace. Like, based on our experience today, what's your biggest takeaway from all this, from these type of webinars, these type of discussions, this type of creating awareness to people watching us right now? What are your biggest takeaways? How can we do this better? How can
also, to add to this question, how are you gonna spread this this movement, so to say? Because if we're always the same people, like-minded people who talk about this, we're not gonna change anything. We need to affect more people. I was very hesitant when I invited Gabrielle to join us here, but I guess she was very welcoming to this proposal. So we need to invite our friends and spread this webinar and spread this idea of dialogue and exchanging opinions and ideas, even if we're not always agreeing on something. But just to hang on to your question, Ali. Now you guys can answer Ali's question.
Yes, and the reason why I asked this question is because the intention of organizing these webinars is because in the long run, who knows, this might be the platform that we all are gonna use as a set, but for peace. You know what I mean? So, any comments on that?
Gabby, go ahead. You are first. What's your takeaway?
Thank you, Tomas. Well, I think actually something that you said really, really struck me, because it's actually something that a mutual friend of ours, Madeline, says frequently when she talks about certain things related to religion. And it's the idea that we can't always just stay in our own bubble and discuss with other like-minded people. One of the biggest things that we can do to really help change society is go and speak to those people who have a different opinion as you. Go listen to them, try to understand them, and don't immediately judge them necessarily. Try to think about what they're saying from their point of view. And I think that this webinar has been a great platform because I think that we all come from a similar perspective in the sense that we all believe in equality in one way or another, but absolutely we all come from very different cultures, and naturally our customs and our habits are different. I mean, as a woman, being somebody who's the only woman here, it's a very, it's an important thing, I think, to have female representation, but it definitely does naturally just feel a little bit more intimidating as a woman. But I think it's also a good opportunity because here I am, perhaps I am defying stereotypes that you all have about women. So I think that things to be able to further this message, it's just important to always speak with people and always engage yourself with other people who aren't necessarily like-minded. I think that staying inside our box is where we encounter danger and trouble within society. When we have everybody who thinks the same, that's where we hit roadblocks and that's where we hit walls. And perhaps that's why we see in the US now that there is a big jump for activism, because we have this terrible leader who is really he's bringing everybody together to unite against a common enemy. So this person who is not like-minded, as many Americans, is bringing out a new sense of change.
Excellent. I really like your answer.
Thank you.
Monologue.
You're definitely an inspiration for all those women watching you right now.
Oh, I really hope so.
Okay, let's go back to Kelt. What's your takeaway? Because we're wrapping up, we have to wrap up in the next 10 minutes.
So basically these type of forums and these, I am a big believer in communication and dialogue and, building connections. I've been doing similar things like this since I was 13, 14 years old. So this is my realm. This is what I feed off of. And, it's very inspiring to be able to be with a group of like-minded individuals from around the world. And, someone is going to watch this video and, someone's going to watch our dialogue that we had here today, and they're going to start a chain reaction. I'm a big believer in creating the chain reaction, but and it just takes conversations like these, and these are important. And I urge our panelists to have these conversations in our communities, whether that be our larger community as a whole, whether that be our universities. It's very important to get people talking and increase this civic engagement.
Mm-hmm. Antonio?
Yeah.
What's your takeaway?
Well, it clearly imagine a solution for all this topic, and as soon as I try to understand your point of view, it's clearly to understand that how to say
Very inspired.
We love you, Antonio. We love you.
Tommy, help me, Tommy.
Well, the main question is, once you log out of this webinar, when you turn off your computer, what stays in your mind? It's probably already late in Italy. You're going to bed now, right? So
No.
what's your thought when you finish this webinar?
Yeah, it's the same. It was a first we arranged this path.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to really understand first by our own the meaning of this lifestyle, of this way to try to get things better. So it's something like a travel. We have started to walk, and now we have to go on.
Okay. Well, now we're travel partners for this. Dylan.
Yes.
What's your takeaway?
So I'm going to spin this and not say I want to have a takeaway, but rather I want to challenge everybody who's listening to work for inches every day. So there's an expression that I love, and it's that if you work for an inch every day, eventually everybody will reach a mile. So I want everybody who's watching to make a new friend, maybe stick up for somebody that you see, or address the stereotype whenever it happens, in order to kind of bring this conversation to more than just this forum. So be proactive, and yes, watching this is great education, but be active about it and do something about it moving forward.
That's a great idea. That's a good challenge. Because that's the only way to take it into our everyday life, really.
Mm-hmm.
Omar. Habibi.
Yes. So I think to answer your question, I think that I would think of my desire for promoting peace through music and through arts and through culture, dialogue, and I would also like always to support the idea that if you really need to know anything about the other, just go talk to that other, in order not to define him as an other anymore. I think this is my belief, and I think this is what I have in mind at the moment of that. Yes, just go call for peace by your talents, by your passion, by your love, by the love you have in your heart, and yes, it could actually be possible that people could tolerate each other and they would embrace their diversity.
Thank you. I think we only have one more left for the closure. Oh, Ali. Ali, of course, Loud, and me. Loud, what's your takeaway from today? What were your expectations when you were invited, and what's your takeaway?
Well, yes, it took me by surprise when Ali asked me to do this. But I like to think that embracing everyone else's culture is something that is very important, you know. Alongside embracing, you need to socialize, you know, to be able to get different perspectives. And by knowing your own culture, you get to enjoy and get to share experiences with other people.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking maybe from this, I'm definitely going to burst my bubble, get to know more people, get to know different perspectives, and then move on
Do
from
it.
there. Yeah.
Do it. Burst the
Well,
bubble. Ali, final words before we call it a day.
Well, my biggest takeaway is I have no words to describe what I'm feeling right now. I feel so proud of all of.
Oh, what happened to Ali? Ali?
Yes.
He's gone.
I was saying that I think we're doing a tremendous change. We're creating awareness. Um, we're being the change that we want to see in the world. And for me, that's the most important aspect of these kind of platforms, because you get to know people from pretty much everywhere. You get to understand different topics. You get to understand different cultures, and that's the most important. I think this is the beginning of everything. This is the beginning of peace. But when we talk about peace, let's talk about it in a sense that it's actually possible. It's not a notion that no, we have to start doing something, and we have to feel ourselves like from now on. This will be my suggestion for all of you guys. We have to feel ourselves as ambassadors of peace. Whenever, like, wherever you go, feel like as ambassador of peace. Talk to people about your experience, as Kyle was saying, and feel empower yourself, and be the change that you would like to see in the world. That will be my biggest.
Okay, Ali, you want to tell, because we have to close now, you want to give any ideas about the forum in September? And I
Yeah.
will share.
Yeah. Well, as Tommy was mentioning, feel welcome to join us in September during the World Peace Forum. It will be taking place in Amman. As for the dates, I'm not as particular, but Tommy can definitely give you guys more information about this. It's an excellent experience. We really had a lot of fun in Brazil. We learned so much, and from now on, I think that we have to see at least once a year anywhere around the world.
Okay, so just to wrap it up, I spread out the invitation for the 11th World Peace Forum to be held, like Ali said, in Amman, Jordan, from the 21st to 25th of September of this year. Like we mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, the main topics will be women's rights, specifically within Islam, women's rights, refugee crisis, and I forgot the third one, but they're very interesting, all three. In the chat box, I sent the link to the Facebook group for World Peace Youth, where you can follow activities and sign up to be a panelist on the next webinar. And hopefully we can multiply this and make this available more often and in more languages and in more countries, because I've been reading here that there were people requesting a webinar in Portuguese and in Spanish. And to make it easier, we always want to keep the webinar in one language, but maybe if we find enough people and enough volunteers, we can multiply it and make it available in different languages. If anybody wants to add anything else, this is the moment. Otherwise, we have to say, we want to say goodbye now.
Yeah, I would love to salute you with my traditional salute. Assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you.
Alaikum salam. Okay, then I wish you all a great Saturday and a great Sunday. And see you on the internet.
See you later. See you guys.
Bye.
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 Bye.